All right. Hi, everyone. It's great seeing you all, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we're excited and grateful to have Dan Hens with us, and he is the Flood Warning Program Manager at the Flood Control District of Maricopa County. Dan is going to talk about this year's monsoon season, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat, and we'll go over them at the end. So, Dan, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Hello, everybody. I'm going to get my slides up and going here real quick. Share. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that now. Again, my name is Daniel Hens, Flood Warning Program Manager at the Flood Control District of Maricopa County. I've been with Maricopa County now for almost, 14 years on Halloween, actually. My background's meteorology, hydrology, undergrad at University of Arizona, which I know all of you ASU folks love. Spent some time in Wisconsin at University of Wisconsin in Madison, got a master's degree there, spent some time with University of Oklahoma Sims department doing research as well as working with National Weather Service in Central Region, just for my background there. But yeah, I've been more or less in the desert here doing operational meteorology for the last 14 years, and before that another 4 or 5 years. So I'm so excited. This is my favorite presentation to give every year. And before I get going, I do want to thank Juliana and Aaron Sappel again for having me. And of course, I want to thank my operations folks at Flood Control. I work with Hannah Whipple, Johnny Malloy, Eric Thomas, and Chandra Miller that kind of helped me put this presentation together and help me every day through operations when we're in these busy monsoons. So let's get going. So what were we thinking? I'm not sure if you know, but we do a monsoon outlook before the season every year. Just a couple little background, some things that stuck out. We had a very hot and dry antecedent winter and spring season, which usually can be a harbinger for a more active summer monsoon. As far as what we were thinking in regards to the long-range statistical model guidance, some of those other clues that we mentioned, official CPC guidance calling for warmer than normal, July, August, September, as well as a shot for a wetter than normal period as well. So again, we're in that above normal temperatures, above normal rainfall. A couple other little quick points on here, just that we're expecting a normal onset, which I'll get into in a little bit in terms of when activity actually gets going. And yeah, with that, off to a normal quote unquote start. So I'm going to be showing a lot of these climatological mean 500 millibar charts, and that's what you're looking at here with, again, 500 millibar heights. The yellows, oranges, reds are higher heights. The blues and greens and then purples are lower heights. Higher heights, high pressure, lower heights, low pressure. And a lot of these are going to be kind of monthly means or the whole monsoon, and just kind of give an idea about really the monsoon high, which you'll see that H designated in the left image and the right image there, telling us, okay, in June, building monsoon ridge, it makes its normal progression north into the desert Southwest throughout the summer, but it's where we want to see it. So as far as when we want to look about temperatures and rain for June, it was hot. As you can tell with this left image here, just much above normal to above normal for more or less the entire state. And then precipitation wise, we're actually really wet. We had a second wet June in a row, and it can be deceiving when you see this kind of thing. You think, oh, a big assist we got from Tropical Storm Elvin, which moved up really early, formed at late May, and then dissipated at the Baja Cabo San Lucas region there. But the remnants actually made their way up across Arizona on June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I have an image on the right there showing our alert data, and you can see we got anywhere from a few tenths to, there were a few gauges that actually got nearly 2 inches of rain or 2 inches of rain. So it's very, very wet. And you just got to think climatological normals across most of the state in June are like 0 or 0.01. So anything over a trace is considered above normal. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, we did get that storm. It didn't count for the monsoon total, but it's still worth mentioning. So in regards to onset, like we mentioned before, of course, the season's June 15th to September 30th. However, there was the previous way of multiple days of dew points, registered at the airport in Tucson and Phoenix. But what you can see here is this is a time series plot showing dew point at the airport in Tucson as well as Sky Harbor. I put a little red arrow there to designate when we would have typically designated the start of the monsoon back before. And as you notice, it's early July. That's what our forecast thinking was. And again, that's when, historically speaking, that first week in July is when we tend to see the onset of storms. So that was all kind of right on par there. You will notice, though, it almost looks kind of like a false start as you move across July and into August. Those daily dew point values, while elevated initially, bottomed out quite a bit and actually were below the average, which is that solid line. So let's talk a little bit about that, okay? So there's this big push here. So was it another hot summer? Well, if you take a pulse on everyone on social media or walking around the halls, and we were actually talking about this before the presentation, it was like, kinda. I mean, it was hot, but it didn't feel that bad. Well, in reality, it was very, very hot. So again, let's go back to our mean 500 millibar plots. And again, we're looking July through August. On the left, you're seeing the climatological mean placement. And on the right, you're seeing what we did for this July and August in 2025. And you'll notice the locations, more or less, were climatologically speaking, we'd expect the monsoon ridge kind of on the Arizona-New Mexico border. But the one thing that I want to point out here is notice the heights, the brighter oranges and reds on the right-hand plot. Higher heights, higher temperatures, potential for subsidence if that ridge is in an unfavorable placement, which again, air flows clockwise around that ridge. So we're getting actually like a southwesterly flow across much of Arizona through the main heart of what would be our typical monsoon where we want to expect thunderstorm activity. And that's not really what we want to see. We'll see that a lot in June. We'll see that a lot in September and even into October. But in the middle of the summer, really, we want that ridge as close as we can get to the Four Corners region for our best opportunity for moisture intrusion, then subsequent thunderstorms. So the ridge was displaced a little bit to the east. And as a result, looking at July and August temperatures, lots of place, much, much above normal. Outside of a few spots there on the lower Colorado River Valley there, which we can see in the left image, very much top third, top 10% in terms of heat. If we look in terms of rainfall as well, outside of Yuma and a couple other portions in the southwest part of the state, it was very dry when we're expecting to have this super active monsoon. There are a few events here and there. Tucson had some decent early season events. Phoenix even had an event on July 1st. But outside of that, up until mid-August, there was not a whole lot to talk about. So we're going to talk about heat real quick. And this is just kind of an extra building on some of the data for the meteorological summer, more or less stating that I think what it ultimately said is that Arizona was roughly the fourth warmest in regards to the June, July, August period. You can see Maricopa County there as a top 5, Pima County a top 5, as well as, even central and northern parts, Mojave County, Coconino, and Yavapai. Overall, it was just pretty hot. What about a Sky Harbor? So some of the other things that we think about. Oh, and I wanted to mention there on the right, on the bottom right, the Weather Service there even mentioned 2025. It ended up being roughly, I think it's the fourth warmest for the meteorological summer. So in regards to, let's talk about some of these key numbers we look for. So days with 100+ degree temperatures. So again, what we typically see is around 111, or that's our climatological average over the last 30 years. We had 119. So not 2020 or 2023 or 2024, but still well above the average there. And then when we start looking at the 110+ degree days, again, we're not keeping up with 2020 or the last two summers. Those are way above us, but we're still at 37, significantly higher than the 21 that we typically see. And then probably the most glaring, this is the thing that's kind of helping keep those temperatures, that average temperature, what was like 97 roughly degrees at Sky Harbor there, the overnight lows, getting 23 overnight lows above 90. When we did finally start to get some of that moisture intrusion, maybe it limits the overall daytime high temperatures, but it will also keep those overnight lows boosted due to the moisture. And so again, 23, which is significantly almost 4 times more than the climatological mean of 7. So it's a troubling progression to see these last, 4 years within the last overall 10 that are setting all sorts of crazy records. But it was hot. So Let's kind of switch over now. I want to start talking about some thunderstorm activity and when the spigot more or less gets turned on in September. So back to our favorite 500 millibar plot. When I mentioned this southwesterly flow, it's a monsoon type 4 pattern. It's really an all or nothing pattern. And again, we typically see it on the bookends of the monsoon where you have your monsoon ridge finally starts to trickle down south back across the board, maybe West Texas, maybe in northern Mexico or southern New Mexico. And then we really start to see pronounced troughing off the west coast of California. That was a detriment to us in July and August. Again, troughing off the west coast in the height of our monsoon, southwesterly flow. We don't necessarily have tropical moisture to boost up, so it's dry. But when we get into September and transition season, and you get those early season troughs, again, and you combine that with tropical systems forming off the Baja Mexico, we can get into our quote unquote Super Bowl type patterns where we can get an entire monsoon season's worth of rain in a single event. And so let's talk a little bit about that. And again, looking on the right, you'll notice September precipitation, a complete opposite, 180 of what we were seeing through the July, August period, where the entire state is at normal and most of the state is either above normal or well above normal in terms of rainfall. So definitely something we like to see when it comes to making up deficit. So I don't have time, unfortunately, in this presentation to get into all of the different talks, but again, with the alert system, our 370 plus rain gauges, we're keeping track of the rainfall. I wanted to bring up the long weekend of September 25th through the 27th. If you look at the rain, a lot of this rain fell over the course of on the 26th. There was rain on the 25th and on the 27th, but the kind of numbers that we end up typically seeing for a monsoon across Maricopa County in particular, 2.5 inches is more or less your lower desert totals, and then you get up towards 3 and 4 and 5 as you're in the higher terrain. Over the course of these 2 days, we had anywhere, our southwest areas kind of got missed, 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. Same with the far southeast valley. But look across Metro Phoenix and north central Maricopa County. Numbers in 1.5, 2.5, 3.5 inches of rain over just one day. That's an entire season in one day. And one of the hallmarks of the monsoon, it's always been this way. I know people still get shocked is we have intense localized thunderstorms that truly can bring an entire season's worth of rain in one event or maybe two events, especially when you're talking tropical moisture. This event right here, more or less, did exactly that, especially when we're talking about Maricopa County, as well as good chunks of Yavapai County and Gila County. And of course, we all heard about the devastating floods that occurred up in Globe. And then even here in the valley along Indian Bend Wash, we saw significant flows. I'm going to talk a lot more about this next week in another presentation, which I'll give a shout out to that in a little bit. But I wanted to point out here, so I was mentioning those gauges. We had 2 gauges over 3 inches, 48 over 2 inches, 250 at least a 1/2 inch. It's a lot of rain over a short event. So in terms of rainfall, let's keep going with this. How do we compare? So let's start with Sky Harbor. So 2025 this summer, we did not fall in the top 10 wettest monsoons, which is a bummer. But we also didn't fall anywhere near the driest, which is super happy for all of us. Let's look at our time series plot provided from Climas at the U of A, and this is at Phoenix Sky Harbor. We can see for the length of the season, 2.76 inches, which is above the latest climatological mean of 2.43, so that's great. But really what we're seeing in that middle part of the plot, you can track the average amount, which is the kind of like this line, this solid line, brown when we're below average, green when we're above. We basically start out with that July 1 event that puts us above normal, and then nothing. The monsoon more or less is there in name only, pumping moisture and thunderstorms in New Mexico and missing us almost completely here in the Phoenix area until we get into August 15th. And then the 14th happened, then the 25th with the big dust storm event, and then early September events, we actually caught all the way up. But in terms of Sky Harbor, saw 10 active days. It was closer to 20 or so if you're looking at the county as a whole where we had total rain. Again, also kind of highlighting this bottom panel, we can look at average temperature ranges as well as where we hit records. You can see those red dots are different daily records that are hit. So quite a few of those as well. Let's look at Maricopa County average. So I mentioned again, we have 370 plus rain gauges spread around the county. You're looking at kind of like we're grouping and filling in the dots around that rainfall. And on this image here, anything that's in the blue shades, there is a 1 to 2 inch totals for the summer. Again, June 15th to September 30th. And then when we look into the greens, We're getting into those 2.5 or so, all the way up to 4 inch totals. And then anything in the yellows and oranges is 5 inches plus. So like you can see, some of the events, the one event I just kind of pointed out there is actually standing out and represented within this whole season total. But what's more interesting to look at instead of the total amount is let's look at the departure from normal. So what this is really fun. We can take all of those gauges and then subtract them out from their mean over the last 30 years here, 30 plus years, and we can find out the departure from normal. And really what we're seeing here is if you lived in Metro Phoenix, straight up I-17 corridor, all the way to Black Canyon, as well as down into Ahwatukee and then the Gila River Indian community, you did great. Near normal to well above normal. And again, a lot of that was made up in the late September rains. If you lived in the far Southeast Valley, or if you lived in the West Valley around the Loop 303 corridor, unfortunately, you did not do so well. Folks that are in the far Northwest County, we typically see quite a bit of rainfall up in the Wickenburg and Aguila areas. Far Northwest County, very dry. And of course, if you live Southwest County, Gila Bend area, for example, very, very dry. So what I really want to get at with this is the typically what we see outside of like a really wet and really dry years like our 2021 or 2022 where everything's green, or last summer or the previous summer of 2020 when everything's red. It's usually a mishmash of near normal to above normal and then next to areas that are below normal. So again, just highlighting that localized thunderstorm activity that is really a part of the monsoon as a whole. So I'm going to try and show you guys a different plat of precip mass curve. And this is how we can track rainfall averaged across the entire county. You can see all the gauges that are included there. So it's not the full 370, it's about 300 or so that have our longest period of record. That black dashed line is our average, and you can see how it goes up as we go from June into September. Roughly, it's 2.6, 2.9, sorry, 2.97, 2.96 is our average when averaged across the entire county alert network. And then we can see 2025 right there, and you can see the daily boost of rainfall. Some interesting stats, fun stats here. 80% of the rain, it was just over like 81% of the rain that we saw for the entire season across Maricopa County, mind you, came after August 12th to 13th. 60+% of the rain fell after September 1st. And then the big one, that September 25th, 27th event I mentioned, contributed roughly 53% to our total monsoon rainfall. Again, when averaged across Maricopa County, 10,000 square miles. It's impressive just to see what one big event can really do. And in reality, it saved our bacon here, especially across South Central Arizona, Maricopa County, in terms of being a wetter than normal or near normal. Like I said, we ended up near normal. We can also compare 2025 to some of our wettest ones, 2014, 2021, 2022 are these ones way up on the top here. And then some other recent dry years, 2020, 2023, 2024. Again, so we kind of got saved right by this late season event, but that's really, again, at this transition season, the heart of what the monsoon is really all about. So another way to look at it, we can look in a bar graph. Again, this is that same thing where we're averaging all the rainfall across our network and then going back all the way to the early 1980s. You can see that mean is around 3 inches and how we kind of settle close up. It's always a roller coaster. There isn't really a deciphered pattern that you get when you look at this kind of plot, other than just to say, you get these extreme years and then you get extremely dry years, and that gives you that kind of middle ground there. So, all right, let's look at the state as a whole. Again, I know not everyone is here in Phoenix. I apologize for, biasing towards Phoenix, but that's where we have most of our data here in South Central Arizona that I can speak about. Going back to our temperature plots here, we can see June through September, very hot, right? Where most places are above normal to much above normal across the majority of the state. And in regards to the forecast that was made, by CPC, the feds, as well as a lot of our local weather folks, that I think have verified pretty well. When we want to look at our rainfall, if you recall, again, we kind of had this bullseye across South Central Arizona to Southeast Arizona being wetter and more active than normal. And what we got in reality is kind of to that. There was some good hits, but a lot of misses as well. Really, the lower Colorado River Valley, due to a few tropical influenced events, as well as Maricopa County, parts of Yavapai and Pinal County, they all did, near normal to above normal, which was great to see. But other folks in Tucson area across Pima County, I know it was really rough. You guys had such a good start in July, and it really kind of fell off after that. And same up in Flagstaff. It was good to see them getting rain, but not the really above normal rainfall, which we really hope to see there up across the Mogollon Rim too, in the Prescott area, down into Payson, over into Show Low and Pine Top. So with that, here's some quick kind of final thoughts on here. It was nice to see a return to a more active and wet monsoon, especially for Maricopa County. With the caveat, of course, it was heavily aided by late season events. What we mentioned that September 25th and 27th, and then September 1st and September 15th and August 25th. So it was very hot across Arizona, even though it didn't feel like it, right? Again, we've had such incredibly hot summers recently that while this one was still hot, it wasn't quite to the same degree. Just lots of overall above normal temperatures that daytime and nighttime, not the extreme heat, but just that long, slow heat. I did mention these facts again around Maricopa County. It's just interesting to see how much of our season was biased towards September. This is kind of like, again, that 2019 or 2018 season, or even back in 2014, where we were really struggling for rain in July and even early August. And then that pattern, that all or nothing monsoon type 4 pattern sets up, and it can really just alter the whole monsoon. So in terms of more details about this, we'll have a monsoon verification report as well as recap that covers all the data across South Central Arizona, the alert system in Maricopa County. That comes out at the end of the month. Johnny and Hannah and I and Allison, we're all working very hard on that. We'll have that in a few weeks. I did want to mention, I apologize for the shameless plug, but for those of you that know Central Arizona chapter, American Meteorological Society, National Weather Association, they do bi-monthly get-togethers where we talk about all things weather, and I will be doing a full monsoon recap there next week over at SRP. We'd love to have you. I get a lot of time to geek out for that one. I think they give me like an hour and a half. So I'm going to get into a bunch of the big events that happened this summer. I mentioned and reference a few, but we're going to talk about rainfall return periods, flooding, all sorts of interesting stuff. And I even want to talk about what's been going on just this past week here in October. So a little sneak peek here. Hope you guys will like this. So what you're seeing on the right there is the total gauge adjusted radar rainfall. It includes our gauge data and then all the radar to help fill in. These are a 4-day total from our Priscilla/Raymond transition event that we just experienced. And if you're looking at those shaded colors, like almost the entire eastern half and southwestern part of some Maricopa County, roughly 8,000 square miles, got over 2 inches of rain over that 4-day period. And we had places that got 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. I want to point out, I was mentioning some return period analysis in terms of rainfall down by Gila Bend. In total, they got over 4 inches just south of town there. But during the peak of one of these convective events, I mean, we were seeing anywhere from 200 plus to upwards of 500-year rainfall return periods in the 1 to 3 hour duration, which that leads to significant flooding. Even more so in the far southeast valley, we have some very large dams, PVR, Powerline Vineyard Rittenhouse structures that got incredible amounts of rainfall on more or less that Sunday time period. I'm sure many of you were woken up early Sunday morning to training thunderstorms. If you live in Gilbert, Queen Creek, South Phoenix, Tempe, it rained the better part from 1 a.m. through 9 a.m. We picked up anywhere from 4 to 5.5 inches of rain. And those structures, I'll just do a quick little point out here. Previous record, 1993 there, 573 acre feet, but more or less, not even 10% full on there. We're right at 10% full. This was the peak of Vineyard. That's roughly 2,000 acre feet. For those of you that don't know, an acre foot's roughly 350,000 gallons of water. So more or less about 700 million gallons of water behind that one dam. And there's 2 others adjacent to it, as well as another 3 or 4 structures that all had water. We just had trillions and trillions of gallons of water that was dumped over a 4 to 6 hour period. And our dams were able to luckily capture that and help convey the water away. They're still conveying that water right now. We have 24-hour ops going on. I'll share so much more about this next week. If you're interested, please stop by. There's behind one of the dams looking out towards the superstition behind a vineyard that we got while out on the scene there. Just impressive to see how much water. But with that, I'm going to stop talking now. I've gone up for about 25 minutes. I'd love to hear if you guys have questions. Let's do it. But thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that amazing presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Dan? I'll give you a couple minutes to put in the chat. Okay, I see one. It is from Alex Garden. Is this much precip as with the microburst abnormal for October? The microburst in Tempe.
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, the precip abnormal is probably a good word. So, for example, like in Phoenix, the whole month of October, typically the lower deserts average around a quarter to a half an inch. I think at Sky Harbor, it's like 0.33 something inches. Sky Harbor now had rain 5 days in a row, and I want to say we're like up over 3 inches, like 3.5 inches of rain. So yeah, that's really wet. It's not abnormal to see these kind of events. Some of you may have remember in 2019, or remnants of I want to say it was Rosa moved up and hit the very far southeast valley. We can get some really incredible rainfall events in October. Again, this transition season, that all or nothing monsoon pattern I talk about with the trough off the west coast, the ridge over Texas, and then just a funneling of moisture up from the Baja. In regards to the microbursts, great question. Transition season is our one time. Okay, there's two times typically that we see in the fall and the spring where the Pacific or the polar jet makes its way far enough south here to influence our events. And when we get these disturbances, we can get severe thunderstorm. We can have shear profiles that actually promote discrete supercells that can do things like strong downbursts, the microbursts or macrobursts. We can see tornadoes, funnel clouds. I think social media, if you were watching, there was all sorts of things that have happened in September, October. If it's going to happen, it happens this time of year. If you all remember in 2010, the great hailstorm that happened across Phoenix and then the subsequent tornado outbreak across Flagstaff, that was, I think, October 10th or 11th. If it's going to happen, it happens now or it happens in March or April. So, but again, I would, yes, call the rainfall abnormal. And again, once we fall out of October into November, December, we lose the availability of instability, which you need for convective thunderstorms. It tends to be more general rains along cold fronts, and we lose the lightning, the hail, the downdraft, the downburst, microburst, macroburst, that kind of stuff. So, but it was very, very interesting to see how that all played out over those 4 to 5 days.
Awesome, thank you. And we have another question from Kayla. She's wondering how abnormal is it or is it normal to receive about 80% of the monsoon rain totals after August 15th?
Great question. I love these questions. You guys are awesome. You're making me smile with this. So I'm gonna put this one plot back up. Uh, because of the nature of our transition events, that monsoon type 4 pattern, it's not, I mean, it's abnormal to get, 80% right. 2014 comes to mind in terms of another season where after we had a big event in August, I want to say it was the 18th or 19th, and then we had September 8th and we had September 27th, where we got, again, that for the 2014, which for a county average of that 7 inches, more or less, all of that came after August 15th. So when you look at 2021 and 2022, those were just busy season. It was fully active from across like late June all the way into September. So those are your more traditional. But I want to say, again, it's abnormal, but not highly abnormal, if that makes sense. What all it takes is one of these transition events where we get, again, 2019, 2018, we get the late season tropical influx of moisture, and that can make the entire season. So
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Dan? Oh, I see one more from Alex Garden. They're wondering if they can see the details about your talk next week again.
oh yeah, I'll leave that right there. You can go find the Central Arizona chapter of AMS NWA on social media, whether that's X, Twitter, Instagram. So it'll be over at SRP. They have the links to all the socials on the bottoms there. So again, it'll be in person. I would love to have you come out. I'll talk, but there's quite a few people in the weather community that show up there, not just enthusiasts, but other National Weather Service we get, other Mets TV folks, and we all get to kind of talk about our favorite thing, which is the monsoon. So we'll be getting into actual events there. Talking big picture too, but it's really fun to talk about the meteorology, what exactly happened with some of these things. So.
And just one quick thing to add. Yes, if anyone is interested in coming, feel free to send an email to centralazams@gmail.com with your first and last name to RSVP. These meetings are open to everybody. So, with that, thank you again, Dan, and thank you all for joining us. And we hope to see you at our next webinar in November. Bye, everyone. Take care.
You.